Chinese President Xi Jinping was elevated to the same status as Mao Zedong at the conclusion of the 19th National Congress of Chinese Communist Party without a clear successor. And prior to this, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was set to lead Japan until 2021 thanks to the electoral victory. And US President Donald Trump still insists America First philosophy. And we have these three strong men, Trump, Abe, and Xi, who are showing off strong leadership and now firmly settled as the leaders of the Korea's neighboring countries. These leaders will play a significant role solving the issues on the Korean Peninsula, including North Korea's nuclear crisis. But at the same time, they are taking advantage of these issues for their own interests in politics and diplomacy. How will these newly elected and re-elected leaders affect Korea? And it's the topic of our discussion this week on Peninsula 24. So we have two experts in the studio for today's discussion. We have a guest to my left, Jae-woo, Professor of Chinese Studies at Kyung Hee University. Professor Choo, thanks for joining us in the studio.
Thank you.
And as always in the studio with me, Dr. Kim Chang-su. Dr. Kim, it's always great to see you.
Thank you for having me on again.
Okay, so on October 26th, the Chinese President Xi Jinping began his second five-year term.
Yes.
Well, it seems to be an effort to mend the relations between China and South Korea, clearly. But what about North Korea? Do you think there's going to be a different policy toward North Korea in the second term?
I don't see an immediate change in his policy towards North Korea, but I think it'll all be subject to the outcomes of the upcoming summit with the United States. President Trump is scheduled to visit Beijing on November 8th.
Right.
Yes, and I think China's North Korean policy will be consequences of their interaction at the upcoming summit, because I think what they promise or what they discuss and what they had complied to at the summit, I think that'll affect the direction and the prospect of China's North Korea policy.
I see. But there was some saying that because Chinese North Korean policy was not really up to our expectation and international expectation as well. But after the 19th Congress, there should be some changes because there's all the political pressures off the shoulder of Xi Jinping. So some people were expecting the changes, as a matter of fact.
Well, I have a different idea because I think basically continue to prevail simply because Mr. Xi Jinping gains power again. He's a strong man. Nobody can challenge him. Nobody can rival him. So he makes the decision. He calls a shot.
Right.
So I think he will reiterate and actually reinforce the two now very famous approaches to North Korean nuclear and missile problem. That is the two-track approach and also two-phase or two-simultaneous initiative. I think because these initiatives and policy has not been pretty much echoed by the Western powers, but now, because many countries, including the United States, are beginning to see some merits of these kind of initiative policy toward North Korea, because this is very realistic, and there's no chance North Korea will collapse anytime soon, and they will not abandon its nuclear and missile programs at any cost for the time being. So I think this is a very realistic approach to solving North Korean problems, from not only from the Chinese perspective, increasingly from other perspectives as well. I think this is exactly what Mr. Trump has been saying, while after pressing so much pressure and sanctions, and then we are looking for some kind of engagement so that North Korea may give up its nuclear weapons and ambitions peacefully. So I think there's some connectivity between these two leaderships.
But clearly there's some effort and attempt to change and remedy the relations between China and South Korea. Is that right? It's a very different mood is going on, actually.
Yes, yeah. Actually, what we have to be really careful is, I think Trump's message, while he's visiting 3 different countries, will differ. I think it was already shown when Rex Tillerson visited made a tour in East Asia last March. What he said in Japan and Seoul and Beijing were basically different. So I don't know what kind of message Mr. Trump will be bringing to all these different states, but I think in particular on the relationship with South Korea, I think it's going to be hopefully something mending to the relationship between the two countries.
Okay. Well, about the Japanese election, I mean, a lot of people expected that Shinzo Abe and his party, the LDP, was going to lose because his popularity and approval rating was going down.
Yes.
But against all expectation, it was a landslide victory. And some people are saying that, well, that's probably his strategy to, using the North Korea as a nuclear threat, and that probably have worked.
Yes.
And I know it's way too premature, but some pundits are also saying that, well, maybe Donald Trump is going to use the same tactic for his re-election, 2020. I'm not really sure about that, but so it sounds like an exaggeration, but jokingly, that the Kim Jong-un holds the fate of Trump and Abe at the same time.
Yes.
So do you agree with that?
Yes, sort of in a way, because obviously it was proven in Japanese election. Obviously, Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister, was able to use the situation and exploited the situation to his advantage and interest. And I think North Korea has been serving these, highlight strongman's interest in their domestic politics. But also at the same time, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was smart enough to also exploit his domestic political situation in which he strove and collaborated well with one of the parties, Kuomintang, who's really opposed against nuclear weapons and so forth. So in a way, it worked out well, but I think his leadership will be challenged again next year, at next year's election, because in order for him, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, to maintain his prime ministership, he has to get reelected as the leader of the party. Yes, right. and that election is coming up in July next year. So, we still have time to observe more developments in Japan and the United States.
I see. But what do you think about Donald Trump's case?
People moving to Donald Trump. Mr. Abe gained a landslide victory, not because of the growing threats from North Korea, but also as part of the booming economy, because Japanese economy is getting better now. And I think people tend to get it together around the strongman. Whenever the election, you feel much better off. Then they tend to vote. This is the case in the U.S. elections and everywhere, in Japan and South Korea as well, in Chinese as well. So I think because Japanese economy is getting better and better, and on the other hand, they're facing serious growing threats from North Korea. So this is a very ideal time for the Japanese people to elect LDP and Kuomintang again, because this is the point they should rally around. Otherwise, they're going to lose the momentum. So I think this is quite natural. But again, Mr. Trump is looking at all these different situations in Japan, in China, in Korea, and getting back to you, because I think at the National Security Council, they're making one very coordinated message when Mr. Trump visits 5 different countries in Asia. But these messages will be very country-specific. They have a very specific message for Japan, very specific one for Korea and China as well. So this is a well kind of coordinated big message, under which there is a very specific message for each and every country he visits.
Yeah, so you gotta be strong to be elected, I think.
Yes, in the world that we are living in, that's true.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, actually, American electors are so attentive to the international issues when they elect a president. But in the case of Japan, it seems like very close to North Korea. And, well, I don't know, I mean, there's some concerns from South Korean perspective. Maybe there's going to be an attempt to revise the constitution.
Yes.
In this case.
Yes. So the revision of constitution, I think it'll come naturally after his election next year, unless he gets reelected as a leader of the party. He's not going to be able to maintain his prime ministership. So that'll be one critical point, and that's the obstacle that he has to overcome.
So we won't see it coming until he is re-elected as a leader of the party next year.
Yes.
Okay, I see. Well, now let's listen to the expert's opinion from China. We have Tong Zhao in line. He's a fellow at the Carnegie Tsinghua Center for Global Policy. Dr. Zhao, well, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, with a stronger mandate after receiving a second term as a head of the party, how do you see the relationship between China and the United States and China and North Korea?
President Xi Jinping will continue to promote a stable and improved U.S.-China bilateral relationship. And regarding China and North Korea, the bilateral relationship is now at a historical low level. And given the international pressure on China to impose more economic sanctions against North Korea, I would expect the North Korea-China relationship to go even worse looking forward.
I see. Well, the former Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, he proposed a so-called grand bargain between the United States and China to resolve the issues in North Korea. Do you think it's a feasible idea?
I think increasingly there is a shared concern between Washington and Beijing that a military conflict could break out and there could be an internal instability in North Korea. As a result, the two militaries are becoming increasingly interested to talk about contingency plannings and crisis management efforts. So we're seeing more military-to-military dialogue there. With that said, I think the Chinese positions and the American positions about what should be the right security structure over the Korean Peninsula after the North Korean regime is removed are still very far apart. And the differences won't be easily resolved overnight.
Okay, I see. Well, thank you so much. That was Tong Zhao, the fellow at the Carnegie Tsinghua Center for the Global Policy. What about the grand bargain theory? It's been around since summer, I think.
Yes, that's right. I think it was in August that Mr. Kissinger brought up this notion of grand bargain with China on the North Korean issue. But I think what he was referring to was some extended cases in other countries. For instance, the United States has a military alliance and a security alliance relationship with Israel without the American military presence in the country. And there are some other cases in which the United States maintains alliance relationship without the military presence in these countries necessarily. And on a scale of military presence, I think the United States so far has only 3 countries that it maintains a scale of military presence like the one in South Korea. I think these are Japan and Germany. But other than that, you look at American alliance, it only has military presence with these countries, but other countries are just alliance with other countries are just a name on the paper. So in theory, his notion works. But I don't know how that will be taken in South Korea.
U.S. President Donald Trump is coming next week, and his trip starts with Japan and Korea and China. A lot of people are expecting that he's going to send some message to North Korea. Will he send a message to North Korea? And if he does, then what will be the content of the message?
I think the message will be almost a kind of the repeat of what he has been saying for the last 9 months.
No more provocative?
No more provocative, yes. The principles will be reiterated, but also I think he makes some room, a window for opportunity for North Korea to accept. That is, if you behave differently, we might give a chance to give a support. And because nuclear denuclearization is actually in the best interest of North Korea, and we really mean it. And if you change your behavior a little bit, with all the kind of, this opposition from the international community, and also kind of problems North Korea is still having technically, I think it is maybe North Koreans are looking for kind of face-saving kind of opportunity at time when they come to the negotiating table, maybe beginning with a kind of talk with Washington and moving slowly to the talks and dialogue, whatever it takes. But I think Mr. Trump has been saying what he really wanted to say to North Korean leadership already. So I think he might modify his position a little bit, even though he's going to stick to his own position, that is strong pressure against North Korea. And maybe at a later time, when time comes really at an appropriate time, and they might introduce a kind of appeasement by part of the Washington leadership. So I think this is kind of more kind of appeasement, rather say, even though they don't like the term appeasement. I think this is I think this is a very wild conjecture. But if this is a real surprise by Mr. Trump, he might give a little bit a different message to the North Korean leadership, because he really wants to use this opportunity, traveling all the, not 3 countries, but 5 countries as well. So I think this is a very important opportunity for Mr. Trump to give his own real intent. We don't want a war in any part of the world. We want a peace. To approach that kind of peace, we have to talk. But you have to give up the nuclear ambition, missile ambition, because there is no way you can hit us with that kind of capability. So we really want you, so this is a warning again, but also kind of in the opening a kind of window for the opportunity for the North Korean leaders to take. So this, in that sense, this might be a little bit surprise to me. Maybe I'm too optimistic.
Very
optimistic.
Yes.
Otherwise, we will not be surprised by his same repeated strong message against North Korean leadership.
I mean, we all know that before the summit, a lot of things are arranged already, right? But because it's Donald Trump, that's why we are talking about maybe there's some surprise. And
yes, that's right.
Maybe the good one, but maybe the bad one as well.
It's like a football. We don't know where he's going to bounce to. So I don't know if we can take this article published in New York Times yesterday and take that article as an indirect message coming from the Mr. Trump or Trump's administration. Obviously, there was an article saying that how fast and how prepared South Korea can be a nuclear power. And they also made a comparative analysis with Japan. And they estimated Japan could become a nuclear power within a year or 2, because Japan is obviously under severe control by the United States as opposed to South Korea. So they estimate South Korea could become a nuclear state within 3 to 6 months, because we have not only the sufficient amount of plutonium reserved, and also we have far advanced technology, and allegedly we carried out 2 nuclear tests in the 70s and so forth. So they estimated we're far advanced than Japan, and I think that message that article might have some intended implications that what kind of pressure is Trump bringing to North Korea and China, because if China does not comply to the cooperative demands by the United States, and North Korea does not really listens well to the United States demands, then we can expect that there's going to be a nuclear domino coming in East Asia. So I think that was kind of implications that the article was carrying.
Well, I'm wondering what made you think that Donald Trump is going to read New York Times. Maybe President Xi Jinping will, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, ahead of Trump's visit on October 27th, the Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, visited Korea for a security consultative meeting, SCM, so-called. And he said, we have to solve the North Korean nuclear issues diplomatically, but still have a military option is on the table.
Our goal is not war, but rather the complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. So our combined effort is to deter that sort of threat, or to have military options, many different military options, that would realistically reduce that threat as low as possible. And yes, we do have those options.
I don't really think he changed that much his attitude, but it is the same continuation of the same attitude and same, the policy.
Sure, the continuity, no change. I don't see any. Even though he said again we have other military options, that's very true, because they say we have all options on the table, and as they say we have all the arrows in the quiver, even though they have not used one arrow yet. So we have all kind of options available to pressure North Korea into abandoning its nuclear missile program. That's the aim. They don't want to stage a war against the North Korea, because you have to remember this. Meeting all these military generals and admirals, the last thing they really want to do is bring these innocent civilians and their young soldiers and sailors and airmen into harm's way. So what they really try to say, we're going to have a very strong deterrence against you. We'll hit you back if you dare to strike us first. So this is a very strong message. It's a very typical military message, even though we are highly ready to strike you back if you first strike us. But that doesn't mean we're going to stage you first, even though we're talking about the preemptive strike so many times. But I think what really makes more sense to the military thinkers is providing some strategic military assets around the Korean Peninsula, rather than allowing South Korea going nuclear or introducing U.S. technology back to the peninsula, or even striking North Korea first without any cause. So this makes perfect sense for the Chinese U.S. military leaders and thinkers that they're going to repeat this same message, basically warning to the Chinese North Korean leadership that we are ready for any kind of contingency, any kind of threats you might provoke against us. I think this is the message. The same message is very true, even though he might use different phraseology terms at this time. But I think it is the same is all the true.
Okay. Well, it's time to wrap up, and there's a last question. So there's a Trump, Xi Jinping, and Abe, and there's another one coming up.
Yes.
Putin, and he is running for the fourth term next year, I believe. So surrounded by all strong men, and the South Korean government claimed to be seated in the driver's seat. How feasible is that?
Well, I would have to ask President Moon to be stronger, because if you want to remain in the same field, same playing field, then you have to be bulky enough and strong enough to match their strength, and we cannot succumb our interests or position to the demands and pressure of these strong men. So in order for us to remain in the driver's seat and try to maintain balance among these strong players, then we have to build our own strength and have to be wiser. Not only in physical terms, we have to get stronger, but we have to get stronger up in our mentality and intelligence.
So to be stronger, what should President Moon do at this point?
I think sitting on the driver's seat makes it perfect, because that means actually we have to play a much more leading role as opposed to depending too much on the outside power. I don't see any problem with that, the idea. But in reality, how can we realize that kind of dream? Sitting on the driver's seat or leading kind of playing a leading role, that means we need more power. We have to increase our deterrence capability vis-a-vis North Korea, and also some other countries in the region as well. And also we have to have a much more clear and transparent policy vis-a-vis North Korea, so that North Korea will have no longer kind of doubt about our intention, because they believe we are going to serve North Korea someday, even though we provide a very good-looking kind of proposal and initiative. That's why North Korea has been opposed to any proposal by the previous governments on the spot. So I think we have to be much more clear. I think we have to send a message to Mr. Trump when it comes to Korea. This is what we want. We want a U.S. continued deterrence, engagement or pledge on South Korea. That's true. But also we want a continued U.S. military presence, and we're going to talk about kind of some burden sharing, and also how we're going to deal with North Korean threats. Changing command system as well. So there's a lot of military options related to this issue. So when it comes to playing a kind of leading role and sitting on the same page, I think we need more, we have to make more efforts to realize that kind of dream.
I see. Well, thank you, Professor Choo, and thank you, Dr. Kim, for a very insightful discussion. And thank you all for staying with us. We'll be back next week with the hottest issues on the Korean Peninsula. If you want to find out what's happening in and around the Korean Peninsula, it's time to tune in to Peninsula 24. Thanks for watching.